Mr. Gagnon. Always Mr. Gagnon has to be told to sit down and shut up. Thanks, Paul. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming today. I think Gary would have been very thankful for today, for his family, his players, and his friends who showed up for him, and pleased that so many people cared and made the effort to come today. My name is Jeff Thompson. I'll try not to make this a AGM type speech, but it'll probably end up that way. It's an honor to welcome you as the Master of Ceremonies as we celebrate and gather and celebrate the life of Coach Gary Howard. I played for Coach from 1977 to 1980, and for the last 10 years I've served as a director on the six-man club, so heavily involved. First, I'd like to introduce the family members that are here. Ann Howard was married or connected to Coach for 40 years. She was a teacher here in Calgary at my alma mater, Sir Winston Churchill. No booze, please. She's joined by her extended family, including her daughter Jody, Craig, and Coach's kids, Heather and Nick. And we know that the last few years with Gary were challenging. We'd like to thank you for the care and love that you provided. Okay. Jody and Nick, last time I saw you, you were like 10 and 12. You had come to our practices in the late 70s in your preteens, and you got lots of attention. You were very cute. You were both very fun-loving, and we enjoyed all the time we got to know you, and thanks for coming from long distance to be here with us today. And for all the players here, I want to welcome all of you that played for Coach. He helped build a culture and a basketball family here at the University of Calgary that Dan has continued to build on. He touched all of us in some way and had an impact on our lives. For me, he taught me the lessons of hard work and leadership and giving back, attributes that I've carried on through the rest of my life. He also believed in me and helped me realize my dream to play university basketball, a life memory I'll forever be indebted to him for. So everyone who played for him, please take a moment and reflect on how Coach positively helped you to become who you became as a person today. Okay. Seeing so many of you here, former players, colleagues, family, friends, speaks to the kind of man that Gary was. He wasn't just a coach, he was a mentor, a leader, someone who believed in developing people. Today we come together. Sandra, I'm ruining your slide presentation here, by the way. So, no, it's just, I'm touching the keyboard and it's possible. Yeah. We're here to remember him, to honor him, to reflect upon the impact he had upon each of us, and to reconnect with our friends. He gave a third of his life to developing young men. In more than just the game, Coach taught us that basketball was never just about basketball. It was about character, hard work, teamwork, resilience, and heart. He was not for the faint of heart. He was tough, and he demanded a lot from his players. He was a fiery personality, he commanded respect. Some days we didn't like him very much. But with time and reflection, I realized that much of the success I've had in my life and our lives together can be tied to the lessons he taught us. I had the good fortune of running into Coach in 2008 at the Youth Nationals, where I saw a different man. He took the time to come watch our daughter play for the Alberta team. It was clear from our talk he really cared about his players and was thankful for the relationship he had. He was happy he made a positive impact. Today we honor him for the impact he had upon all of us and the community he helped build here at the University of Calgary. We're going to have 4 speakers today, and then I'll read a speech from one of the Brendan players. Ann Howard will be our first speaker, and we'll share her stories in their life together as a couple and the impact that Coach had upon her and her extended family. Tom Bishop will speak for the players and the memories from the 70s period. Tim Maher will speak for the memories for the 80s period, and Jeff Smith will speak for the players and the memories for the 90s period. I will then read a tribute from Bill Moody, who was a player at the University of Brandon, who was also a good long-term friend with Coach. After the formal speeches, we'll open the floor to anybody who wants to come up to the podium and speak as an open mic. And we respectfully ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes and keep them positive. Okay? Paul, that may be a problem for you. Okay. Some quick housekeeping. There's thank yous that come along with this type of event. First, we'd like to thank Denny Hopp, Colleen Bangs, Six Man Club for the financial contribution that was made to make this event happen today. We also want to thank Dan and Sander for organizing the visuals that you'll see. There's also a table over here to the right that's got some Garyisms that you got to go and see, because he was always one for cliches, and they've caught some of the really good ones over there. Okay. Also, thanks to Denny, he created a endowed scholarship for Gary many years ago. Thank you, Denny, for doing that. Anybody? I can't be in an audience without asking for money. So if anybody wants to contribute to the scholarship that Denny put in place, please see Dan or myself afterwards. Okay. We're likely going to run 1 to 1.5 hours today. So anybody needing the bathrooms, you go out the hall, out the door to the right and to the left, and you'll see the signs for the bathrooms. Hopefully we won't need a fire exit, but it's over here if we need the fire exit. Okay. There'll be a cash bar afterwards. Please stay and mingle with friends and share memories of your time here at the University of Calgary and of Gary. Thanks to the work that Sandor did in preparing the slideshow and Dan, with Dan's help. I invite you to think about the moments that meant the most to you, whether it was a game-winning play, a quiet conversation, lifelong friends that you developed here at the University of Calgary, or a lesson that he taught you that stayed with you long after you left the gym. So take a look at the slides that were put together. We'll be videotaping this event, Anne, so there'll be a copy for you. Okay? And there's a guest book at the back, so hopefully we've captured everyone's names of who's here today. Okay? I'm going to introduce the speakers now. Today, we're fortunate to hear from several people who knew Gary in different and meaningful ways. Each of them carries their own memories, their own stories, and their own connection to the man that we're honoring. Our first speaker is someone who shared life with Gary in every sense, his wife, Ann Howard. Ann, thank you for being here and allowing us to share this day with you, and please come forward. Okay. Sandra, you want to get the computer so it's ready for machines?
Tom Bishop was very kind to make sure that you could actually see me over the podium, since you can tell I'm not a basketball player at all.
I'm going to just get in here, okay?
And technologically, I'm really dumb too. So it's a good, wonderful thing I know all these people.
All right, so it'll be there.
Okay,
I'll come up and
and
start
you'll
it.
come up and
Come
start
up and
it.
start it, okay?
Okay, is this on?
Yeah, it's, the mic's listening. Oh, gosh.
Oh no, it's a glitch. The first technical glitch.
Oh, goodness.
Hey, I'm glad it's you and not me.
Yeah, no kidding. Well,
We need a little humor, anyways, in this.
we're going to put this back on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see you up here. Okay.
Okay, we're good now, I think. Okay, before I begin, I would like to welcome Nick and Heather and Jody. They came a long, long ways. There are other friends of mine that came from far distances. Gary's best friend in Oliver, Robert Mattis, drove here from Oliver through the storm, through the whatever. He said, oh, the roads were great. Jody arrived yesterday in the middle of the storm, and the turbulence on the airplane was not great. She had remarks to make about that. So with the kids here, I would like to express our gratitude to all of you who came today to honor Gary. I would personally like to thank those of you who welcomed us as a couple, witnessed our love for each other, and kept us in your circle for all these years. Gary wore many hats in his life. He was a coach, he was your mentor and a leader. He was your colleague. He was a dad, a stepdad, and a father-in-law. He was a beloved member of my extended family, the Dawson clan, and the Craig family. He was the loyal son of Crystal and Jerry Howard, and a treasured member of that family, including his uncle Dick, who built his first basketball hoop in the barn, where Gary worked hours and hours on his shot. And you recall, if he took you on in a game of horse, he kicked you. He was also a very fond member of his uncle Bud, who taught Gary resilience and loyalty under pressure, because Uncle Bud was a POW, and he actually helped dig the tunnel that was featured in The Great Escape. Quite interesting. Gary was also a golfing buddy, and at Valley Ridge, Francisco Grande, Arizona City, and Incameep Canyon. That's all we did after I finally retired. We golfed 36 to 45 holes a day, and Gary actually got really, really good at the game. In fact, my good friends that are here, Liz and Donna, the girls would come out to Oliver, and we would play, and the guys were in the Penticton Open. And so Gary played with us one day, and we used to be able to beat him. And he laid a little 75 on us and said to Liz and Marjorie, "See, I told you I could play." That was just typical Gary. He was just a great friend to others like Robert and our very, very good friends from Fort McMurray that golf with us all the time. Of course, to me, he was my husband and my best friend for 40 years. No blubbering, Ann. Our relationship was filled with joy, laughter. You know Gary's such a funny man. You will read some of his things. I know all the lines. I learned them. He had an unwavering commitment that we shared to enrich each other's life. Many have mentioned how much of an impact Coach Howard had on each of you. He had a huge impact on me during our life together. He supported my career, and I supported his. He supported my coaching choices, even though he would say to me, Ann, you coach the sissy sports. Nicely said, but sarcastic. And he attended as many games and tournaments as his time allowed. I remember him walking into Western Canada one night, late to my game, and it was the senior boys volleyball, and he's barely in the stands and he's yelling, check the score, check the score. Well, finally one of my players who was on the bench yelled over, Coach Howard, we're playing rally point, which of course, there's a point on every possession. I never saw Gary blush, but he did that night. Now here's even a better story. He helped me chaperone the Calgary contingent to the provincial badminton championships in Red Deer. Can you believe Gary Howard had to sit for 2 days watching badminton? And he did it, he didn't even whine about it. He was such a supporter of me, it was amazing. Our good friend Mike Fullerton, who's here today, we tried to convince Gary to play some badminton as I ran a club at the school. And Gary, he was awful at this sport. He held the racket like a frying pan. And you know in badminton, you go this way, so you hold it, like you hold a tennis racket. Anyways, every time Gary would try to stroke the bird, he would hit the side of the racket. So any aspirations that we had for him to be a badminton player were short-lived. I mean, terrible. He was horrible at the game. So, he used to say to you players, you have a lot of potential, but I'm not saying the rest of that quote because it's got bad words in it. Truth be told, Gary had no potential as a badminton player. Coming back to the provincials, that's how the story started. The really good kids in high school were club players. And from Calgary, they were from the Glencoe Club. And in Edmonton, they were from the Glenora. So they always wanted to get together because they played tournaments, of course, all over Canada and in Alberta. Well, they were sneaking out after curfew, and Gary heard them. And he went roaring out of our room. And he said, if you kids don't get back to bed, I will personally kick your asses. Being high school kids, they scurried back to bed. And I think he would have. I just burst out laughing. I stayed in the room. And I burst out laughing because I think he might have. They went to bed. Okay, moving on. Gary and I moved to California to watch Jody play her senior year at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where she went when Gary had been instrumental in getting Dr. Marilyn McNeil, who used to coach at Calgary, to recruit her. And her biochemistry professor, oh my goodness, that was a story. Biochemistry professor provided us with a place to live in his house so that we could truly enjoy college life. Now, where am I? Well, however, when Jody had first arrived on campus, Marilyn had become the athletic director. So they had a brand new coach. And in a parking lot one day, Gary was helping this newbie coach with some strategy to make the team a little better. Well, unbeknownst to us, Jody could tell you about this, they had named one play Gary. And so the girls would run down the court yelling, Gary, Gary. We're sitting in the stands. We don't know what to think about this. He thinks they're calling him. He didn't know what to do. So anyways, it was very funny. You had to be there. During that time, Gary also helped Jody continue to develop her three-point shot. He was an excellent shooter himself, and he was an excellent teacher in shooting. And he helped Jody, and it really helped her be very successful in her college career. Many years later, Gary moved back to California. He left me at home because I still had work commitments teaching. And he mentored Jody for a season when she was the head coach at Foothill College. And this is the best. This is the best experience for Coach Gary Howard. He had to work with girls for the first time. Of course, it was quite a challenge for him. He told me a story one night. He said, she couldn't even practice because she lost her ankle bracelet that her boyfriend had given her, and she was crying and couldn't practice. He said, what's that all about? So anyways, it was quite a challenge for him. He worked at toughening up the players and, in his usual fashion, demanded the same work ethic that you all learned. It was rewarding adventure for him by the end. He very much enjoyed it, even though he'd like to say he didn't really. Also interesting to note, our very own Tony Mack, who's right here today, he also helped Jody when she was at Foothill College. And it was like old coaches giving back to newbie young coaches and helping them grow. And so I have many more stories about how he helped me grow, how he helped Jody grow, and we kept learning and growing together. As hokey, I'm almost done. As hokey as it might sound, Gary and I had the song, You Raise Me Up, dedicated to each other, because that was our major goal, to enrich our lives. And we liked Josh Groban's performance the best. You all know Gary is a country person, but we very much enjoyed other types of music. The chorus says, you raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I'm on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. I would like to share this song with you. Sandra's going to help me now. And then I have two more sentences.
Okay, let's see if we can get this right.
If we don't, it's okay.
No. When I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart burdened be, that I am still and
wait here in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Josh Groban.
That's good, thank you. Gary's most powerful legacy will be his life well lived. A life of kindness, integrity, and connection. Thank you very much for listening. This is when I always cry. Thank you for respecting and loving Gary as much as I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for those great stories, beautiful words. Our next speaker is Tom Bishop. He really doesn't need an introduction, but I'll prop him up anyways. For those who don't know Tom, he was an outstanding player here at the University of Calgary in his time, member of Canada's national team, Hall of Fame inductee here at the University of Calgary. And for 8 years, he was our president of the Six-Man Club. After his playing career ended, he went on to become an educator, a high school administrator, and a coach who shared many years of friendship and connection with Gary. Tom, please join us.
So half the things that Jeff said right at the start is like pages 4 to 8 for me, so I'm going to freelance some of the stuff that I've got here. I had the pleasure of working with Gary Howard. He coached me nationally and internationally. I coached with Gary. I coached against him when I was at the University of Alberta, and then I took over for Gary when he was on sabbatical. Now let's be honest here. Gary liked to smoke, he liked to drink, and he liked to swear. On occasion, he threw lamps, chairs, and TVs out of hotel room windows. Never a credenza, but some of the lighter stuff. But one of the things that was true about Gary is that he loved the game so much, and he loved his players. Gary showed up in 1974 from Brandon University and was an instant success with the media. He was so quotable. Some of the lines he said was, "We're going to fill the air with cannonballs and play tough defense. We're going to start playing defense when they get off the bus, and we'll stop when they get back on the bus." One of his lines I didn't really understand is, "We may not win a lot of games, but we're going to spill a lot of popcorn." Gary also had some lines that we couldn't quote, and it usually started off with, "God damn it." And his line was, "God damn it. These guys are running up on the floor with my paycheck in their mouth." Or my all-time favorite, "God damn it, I've had my blood alcohol level higher than this guy's grade point average." I first met Gary in the fall of 1974. Pat Lee and I were shooting baskets in the Red Gym, and Pat said, "Oh, let's go meet the new coach." So we went in and saw Gary, and Pat was new to the system. I was in my 4th year, and I thought I had things pretty well figured out. I was a big guy on campus. Pat, he said, "Glad to meet you, Pat." And then he looked at me and he goes, "Tom Bishop, here you got a lot of potential, but you play like a pussy." Okay, thank you very much. Practices started in September of 1974, not on the basketball court, but on the football field. We ran 10 220s a day for 2 weeks. After the 10 220s, we would go up onto a raised area of grass that Gary had sectioned off, and we'd do shuttle runs. And then he had 2 ropes suspended at 10 foot and 8 foot, and we'd do rope jumps. That was the first 2 weeks that we did it. One day we were out there, and this massive thunderstorm comes through. The football team ran inside. It's hailing, it's raining on us, and this funnel cloud starts developing. And Gary's from South Dakota, so we thought, well, this guy knows a little bit about tornadoes and all this. And Gary's looking up and he goes, "If that thing touches down, we'll go inside." Ted Heller goes, "If it touches down, we're in Brooks." So we went into the locker room afterwards, and some of the football players are going, "That guy's got a new form of crazy going on." And we're going, crazy or passionate? We're still voting on that one. Once we got into the gym, we thought, okay, offense, let's go. It was defensive shuttle drills, box out drills, loose ball drills. I used to wear knee pads because it wore off my knees diving for loose balls. I'm 6'6". Why am I diving for loose balls? Then we put in some offensive drills. What Gary did was give the 12 players a sense of purpose, structure, motivation, and respect. He mixed this up with a great sense of humor, and he always had an open door policy. You can go and talk to him anytime you wanted. We played hard, we were well prepared, we were in great condition, and teams that played us knew that they were going to be in for a tough game. The 1975-76 team went 19-1. Our average on offense was 82 points, and our defensive average was 61 points. We had the opportunity of playing up in the University of Alberta, and the University of Alberta decided they were going to put a bunch of football players behind our bench. And instead of being loud and just cheering and all that, they started throwing out racial slurs, making fun of the players, doing a lot of things like that. Gary heard this, he called a timeout, and he said, "We are going to play the toughest man-to-man defense this team has ever played." Final score, U of C 91, U of A 57. And all U of C players hit the score sheet. The thing to remember about the 75-76 team was that I was a veteran. I had played my 5 years and I was 22 years old. We had an incredibly young team where the team average was like 20 or 21, except for Pat Lee, who I think was 48 when he finally graduated. But he had taken a team of young men, had given us all the structure and motivation to get us to a point of being nationally ranked 1 before we went to the national championships. In the spring of 1977, I was invited to a national team tryout camp. Now, my whole basketball career, I played as a post, my low post, my back to the basket. And so I go to the national team tryout camp, and I'm posting up against 7-footers. And I used to have a fadeaway jump shot. I was fading a lot. Jack Donahue pulled me aside, and he goes, "Tom, you're not a post. You're a shooting guard or a small forward." Never played that position before. One of the reasons I made one of the teams is I was in excellent shape. I could jump and I could run, and I knew how to play some defense. So when I got back to Calgary, I called up Gary and I said, "I'm lost. I'm in trouble here." And he goes, "Monday morning, 10 o'clock, red gym, let's go." For 2 weeks, 10 till 12, every day, he worked on offensive moves from the forward spot, defensive drills to the forward spot. At one point, he wanted to play some defense on me, and we had some random guy in the gym. I think he had hiking boots on. He was at the other end of the gym. So Gary pulls him over, and he goes, "You want to play some defense on this guy?" And the guy goes, "Sure, let's go." Well, he's got his back to me, and he's dancing up and down. So all of a sudden, Gary's going, "God damn it, you got to get your hand out. You got to look down the hand, see both man and the ball, and you got to shuffle." Right? Well, random guy couldn't figure that out. So Gary put random guy as a passer, and then Gary played defense on me. Now, Ken Shields and Gary Howard play the same kind of defense. You will be bruised and cut. Your shirt will be torn. There'll be fingerprints on your arms. He beat the crap out of me. It's the toughest defense I've had played against me. From then on, I met every national tryout camp that I went to. And Gary showed me the loyalty that he had for his players. In the summer of 1977, I was picked to go to the World Student Games in Bulgaria. And Gary, being the coach of the year, was picked as the guest coach. So we went through Portugal, the former Yugoslavia, and Bulgaria. And in Yugoslavia, we were playing outdoor games at night in front of about 4,000 people. Now, when you're playing in Yugoslavia, they sell a lot of corn on the cob, wieners on sticks, plastic liquor bottles, and things like this. And these people would throw this stuff at you all the time. Well, one time we're standing there had been some altercation on the floor, and they'd pulled both teams off, and the coaches and the refs are talking, and I hear this yell, and then I hear, "I've been shot." I look over, and Gary's lying on his back, he's clutching his chest. They're starting to take the bleachers apart, and he's been hit by a 1-inch nut that some guy's thrown at him from the other side of the court. Okay, so we're playing Macedonia, and we had a team that came in 4th in the World Student Games, so we had a pretty good team, and we were beating the crap out of these guys pretty good. So we tried to make it onto the bus. Well, they wouldn't let us on the bus. We had to do a walk-on on the sideline closest to the crowd so we could get out to center, and then they give you these little flags. Well, they're spitting at us, they're swearing at us. We get to center, and I look over at Gary, and he's got this 5-inch stringer of spit hanging off and he's got the biggest smile on his face, and he goes, "Isn't this the best? I can't believe how much fun this is." The man's love for the game, no matter where you were, was incredible. In 1974, Gary made a quote that said, "The boys aren't getting paid for playing the game. They're out here to have fun. It's my job to see that they do." Coach, you did that. Thank you very much.
What would we do without Sandor?
Oh, gosh. Let's get this back up. Oh, gosh. Thank you.
So Tim, don't touch the keyboard.
No,
Okay?
you know what? I'm just gonna leave it like that. How's that? That's okay.
So Tim, you drew the short straw. You have to follow Bish. Thanks, Tom, for those great stories. Next, we'll hear from Tim Maher. Tim played for the Dinos from 1980 to 1984. A bunch of his teammates are here today. He later served on the UFC Senate, and professionally, Tim was a lawyer here in Calgary. I don't know how such a nice guy became a lawyer, but anyways, Tim, the floor is yours.
Gary L. Howard was smart, funny, intense, competitive, fiery, tough, direct, demanding, and I loved playing basketball for him. Apart from basketball, he had a positive influence on me and many others. He was a force to be reckoned with, and if you tied your wagon to that force, you were in for an incredible ride. In September of 1980, I wandered into his office to tell him I'd like to try out for the basketball team. He looked up from his desk. "What's your name?" Tim Maher. "Never heard of you." "Where'd you play?" "Bishop Carroll." "Who was your coach?" I told him. "I never heard of him either." "So can I try out?" "Yeah, Wednesday." Well, it turns out that I made the first cut. After the joy of training, we got to get ready for the season. But cuts still had to be made. And I'd show up at practice and I'd notice that guys that were there the day before had disappeared, never to be seen or heard from again. And I realized that he was picking us off one by one. Yeah, so I learned to avoid eye contact with him at practice, and if I saw him coming my way, I'd head the other way. I managed to sneak around for a few weeks before he realized I was still there. One day he cornered me. I couldn't escape. I kind of knew my time was up. But you wouldn't believe how diplomatic he was. "Maher, you're a good athlete. You have potential. But you can't shoot, and you can't pass, and you can't dribble. We have to cut you." So I got sent down to the JV team. However, due to an incredible stroke of good luck for me and some bizarre circumstances, I got called up to the varsity team after Christmas. My overriding memory of our time with Gary Howard was how much fun we had. It was the fun that you get by trying to do something hard well. He was a great teacher, and his intensity and enthusiasm for basketball were infectious. Playing for him was hard, no doubt about it. Practices were filled with instruction, hard work, challenges, and humor. But after each practice, you felt like you had done something good that day. He cared about winning games, for sure. But he also really cared about how we played, win or lose. We were rarely reprimanded by him for a loss, unless he perceived a lack of effort, a lack of attention to detail, a lack of care, or a lack of hustle. Things like failing to dive for loose balls, failing to box out, failing to run the floor, failing to get back on defense were all unacceptable. He highly disliked finger rolls, trying to dunk a rebound, one-handed passes, bounce passes into the post. Oh, bounce passes to a big man on the run. He really hated that. There are a few little basketball nuggets that he used to say that have stuck with me over the years and I used when I coached kids in community basketball. For example, when we would scout teams at a tournament, he would remind us, no team is ever as bad as they look, and no team is ever as good as they look. He constantly reminded us to be quick, but to not hurry. My personal favorite was, it's always the passer's fault. Gary took great pride in being an educator. He taught the basketball coaching theory class at the university, which was well regarded by students. He taught the game to many youngsters at Dino Jamboree camps and at clinics throughout the province. And of course, he taught his players. He had strong communication skills. He conveyed his ideas clearly. He was always well organized. He accepted our mistakes as we learned new concepts, and he encouraged us to keep getting better. He adapted his coaching to individuals and to the team that he had. He provided feedback and maintained high expectations. At practice, for 2 hours a day, 4 days a week, he taught, encouraged, and challenged us to be better. And then on Friday and Saturday nights, we got to show what great students we were. He rarely resorted to gimmicks, but sometimes he'd get an idea. Once, for reasons only known to him, he decided he was going to hypnotize us. So we gathered in a quiet room, lights out, and this hypnotist that he had hired started to put us in a trance. Gary and the hypnotist thought this was all going great. Until someone, who shall remain nameless, pierced the silence with a resounding fart. Of course, we all broke up, laughing our heads off. Gary did not see the humor. Up until then, he thought we had actually been hypnotized. And he was not happy that he could not identify the offending flatulent player. Once he tried to motivate us with music. In 1984, we were getting ready to play the University of Victoria Vikings, whom we hadn't beaten since 1980. Gary told us at the start of the week that he was going to bring in some inspirational music. We were all excited to listen to Gary's music. He brought it in, he turned it on, and we were expecting Eye of the Tiger or We Are the Champions. No, it was Frank Sinatra singing The Impossible Dream. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, and so on and so forth. We lost to the unbeatable foe, 93-61. The impossible dream might not have spurred us on to victory. But I now realize that song contains themes and ideals that he taught us. To get out of your comfort zone, to set lofty and challenging goals, to believe in and to fulfill your potential, to persevere, to be resilient, and to be courageous. We were lucky to have been coached by Coach Howard, and we were lucky to have known Gary Howard.
Thank you, Tim. I think you won that case. Our final formal speaker today is Jeff Smith. It's been wonderful getting to know you again, Jeff, after all of your son's time with the basketball team and having you around again. Jeff wanted this introduction, so I'll read it. Like many of the 1990 Dinos, Jeff played for high school coaches with close connections to Coach. Jeff's high school coaches were former Bobcats under Coach. Jeff's very sure that those players would say they played for Coach before he calmed down. He left the Bobcats and moved to Calgary to coach the Dinos. It also demonstrates the lasting impact Gary had on the basketball community of Brandon, that those same men, in time when Canada West coaches couldn't make first contact with recruits outside their province, supported Jeff in connecting with Coach and eventually playing for the U of C. Jeff is proud to have played all 5 years for the Dinos, and in 1994, after convocating from Oxford on the Bow, Jeff is equally proud to have been the Dinos' assistant during Gary's last season at the helm. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Sandra, if I touch the keys, is this going to mess things up? So I was 18 when I arrived at the University of Calgary, or as Jeff just said, Oxford on the Bow. And so what that means is, for the entirety of my adult life, breakfast food has been a cause for contemplation and reflection. Coach always said, if you want to understand the difference between a commitment and a contribution, just look at that plate of bacon and eggs. The chicken made a contribution, but that pig made a goddamn commitment. The lesson wasn't just about effort or sacrifice. It actually was the blueprint for what it meant to play for Gary Howard. So, like, all honestly, when I agreed to do this, I really struggled to decide what to say here. How can you put into words what he meant to all of us who played for him? The impact he had in our lives. And so last night, I was sitting down at my keyboard, and I was still working my way through it, and I hear Coach's voice. Stop being a sissy, get off your ass, and get after it. Okay. Actually, honestly, the word wasn't sissy, but I decided it might not be best to use direct quotes. All I will say is the coaching vernacular of the 70s and the 80s and the 90s might be a little bit different than it is now. But there are a few people that I've ever met who have had a direct and descriptive communication style as Coach Howard, and I will leave it at that. I'd also say that quoting Coach isn't enough, but there are some great ones, some of them on their board over here. Playing in the 90s, man, if you weren't mixing it up enough, you were a ticket taker, you were a faint of heart, and you need to get after it like Jack the effing Bear. I have no idea who he is, but that man still scares me to this day. Yeah. Before games, you were as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, everyone's personal favorite, couldn't pull a needle out of your ass with a tractor. Hey, ref, can I get a technical foul for thinking? If the ref said no. That's good, I think. And he got away with it. I don't know how he did. Oh, God damn it, you zebras are the best reasons cousins shouldn't marry. You know, I fully admit to some trepidation in my first pregame when Coach told me it was nut cutting time. Like, I thought he's half serious. And actually, it's been 3 decades, and I think he was only half kidding. I actually liked it better when it was steak and salad circuit time, or bright lights and country music time. That I was a whole lot more relaxed with. You know, in the 90s, we played for him when he had the world's worst ponytail, by the way. One of my favorite moments in practice, because his job was always on the line. During a free throw drill, he walks over and he's Smith. And he's, of course, we all know about the appendage. You better start making your free throws because I'm too old to stand in the goddamn unemployment line. Okay, coach. Clank. He had more words. Oh, yeah, I love that man. But the truth is, if you only repeat back what Coach said, you weren't really listening. Like, kidding aside, when I started to think about what Coach meant to us, and I thought as young boys and you're growing up, the people around you, the most impactful men in your life are chosen for you. Your grandfathers, your fathers, you know, your uncles, your family friends. This group of your family and their close immediate friends first help you grow. But as you become older, become young men, that circle of influence starts to grow and it expands. And people from outside of your immediate family group start to have an impact on you. And there's lots of people in all of our lives who have an impact on the men that we grew to become. But choosing to play basketball, to U of C, meant Gary Howard was one of those men. Sorry, Ann. So lots of words can be used to define these people who've helped us grow. Tutors, instructors, guides, trainers, advisors, friend, counselor, teacher, mentor. To me, the most impactful term that encapsulates everything is coach. As I asked Jeff to say, like most of the people in this room, I had several coaches growing up. I played for former Gary players. Bill Moody was one of my coaches. You're going to read a speech from him. Gary impacted me before I even met him. And so over time, I think I've learned that good coaches understand the game. They focus on developing players, and they teach them to play the game the right way, and they provide structure and feedback, encourage, right? Ensure players believe in themselves. They teach, they mentor. They do a good job of coaching. I've also learned, though, that I think there's a difference between good coaching and great. Great coaches are gifted. They have the ability to unlock what's bound within others. That means that great coaching is deeply confronting. I'm not talking about being confrontational. Over the past years, I've seen my fill of mediocre coaches who think yelling and calling out players and pointing out what they've done wrong is what it takes to be a great coach. It does not. When I say great coaching is deeply confronting, what I'm saying is great coaches make you confront yourself. Great coaches cause you to take an honest look in the mirror, accept responsibility for everything you find, even the parts you don't like. Actually, especially the parts you don't like. That level of accountability is uncomfortable. It's not easy. Forces you to challenge yourself and to understand that you can't lay blame on anyone else. Take responsibility for how you've shown up. Great coaching involves dealing with the uncomfortable. The uncomfortable truths we probably wish to avoid, but through facing them, we open a door to growth and to reaching our potential. So we all know how coach described potential, and we also knew we needed to get after it. It also seems like what I just said, the onus for great coaching puts the onus on the players. That's not true. The onus is always on the coach. There are no off days for great coaches. Coach taught us the only way to do something was the right way. It was done with the utmost enthusiasm and effort and intensity, and anything less would be challenged. Truth is that coach was demanding. He was demanding. But he demanded as much or more of himself than he ever did of us as players. Failing to plan is planning to fail is not just something coach said. He lived it. As Jeff said, I had the honor of being Gary's assistant coach during this final year on the bench. Even in his 20th year at the helm, his dedication and commitment never failed. Nor did his will to compete. It was always about winning. First road trip of the year, we go to University of Victoria. We don't win on the Friday night. Routine after the Friday game was always the same. Get the players back to the hotel. Believe it or not, current players, we only traveled with 10 at that time, so half of us couldn't walk. And then once the players were taken care of, the coaches would go back to the coaches' room. He had this black plastic briefcase. He'd open it up. He would take out the remote control because the trainer had already hooked the VCR up. He'd take out a carton of cigarettes, this giant bottle of Lemon Heart. He'd pull out this bag of change and bills and would say, "I'll buy if you fly," which means he sent me to buy Diet Coke. And we start watching the game, and we would break down the game. And so this first night, actually the remote, like, you have never seen anything quite so fun as Gary trying to hit pause on the button when he couldn't, and it's still playing. And so the remote would never work, and he would be like, "God damn it, trained monkey can use it. Here." And he'd give it to me. And it still wouldn't work, but then he could yell at me for not doing a good job. It was so good. So anyways, this end of this first night, we finally stopped watching the tape. And we've planned out shooting practice and what we're going to say in a video session. Like, I think the tape was worn out. The bottle of Lemon Heart's gone. I probably smoked 3 packs of secondhand cigarettes. And so, this is not word of a lie. He goes, "Okay, I'm going to have a shower. Go wake the boys up, and then we'll go for breakfast." It's 8 in the morning. We're up all night. He refused to do anything, then make sure we're prepared. There was no way that we were going to stand in front of his players the next morning and be unprepared to help them do everything they could to win. It was remarkable, right? We were 6-14 in the league that year. We didn't win a lot of Friday games, but nothing stopped him. He kept preparing. No one worked harder than Coach did. As I look back, and I've done some of my coaching on my own right, we were so prepared that in the 5 years I played for him, I could probably count on one hand the number of times he used a clipboard, which is staggering to me. There's no surprises. At some point, all of us were called out for not doing something incorrectly. People didn't see that Coach picked you back up. He taught you how to do it correctly. Teaching occurred in practice, and we were prepared for any adjustments that would be made in the game. He taught the game the right way. It's also said that people won't remember you for what you did, remember for how you made them feel. So what outsiders didn't see, that as players, we knew he mattered. He knew what he asked of us, and we knew he cared for each and every one of us. And so, to get back to that damn plate of bacon and eggs, everyone who played for Gary was a pig. So was he. He was tough, relentless. The dedication he demanded was returned 1,000-fold, and together, we were all part of something bigger than ourselves. We were a team. And so even though we're saddened by his passing, for those of us who played for Coach Howard, there's a lot of them with us. You know, I talked earlier about people who helped us grow from boys to men. Gary taught us what it meant to be a man. He made us tougher, made us smarter. He taught us to face challenges head on, not to shy away from feedback, but instead use it to make ourselves better. He helped us grow to be better people. Coach taught us how to compete. And he taught us how to win, not just at basketball, but at life. And if you take a look around this room and you know about all the former players who played for him, his career is full of teaching young men how to win at life. He cared for us, we cared for him, cared for each other. And the bonds we formed between teammates are now just as strong. We don't say we used to be dinos, we are dinos. And it speaks volumes that after decades, Gary is and always will be our coach. Gary Howard was the greatest coach.
If I was to net out what Jeff just said, there's a piece of Gary Howard and all the players that are here today. Those that could put up with his coaching and his teaching techniques all grew from him and have part of him in you. Okay, enough of that. Bill Moody was one of Gary's players at the University of Brandon. He asked if I could read his speech for him. We are gathered to honor and celebrate the life of an extraordinary individual, my coach, my mentor, and most importantly, a lifetime friend, Gary Howard. Coach Howard had a profound impact on my life. Although I have a deep sense of loss, I also have an immense gratitude for his guidance and his motivation and the lasting friendship he provided. He was an exceptional leader with a clear vision. He led by example, showing our team the value of hard work, discipline, and perseverance. His ability to motivate and inspire us to reach our full potential was remarkable. His guidance allowed us to achieve milestones we never thought possible. He had a unique ability to connect with each team member on a personal level. His care and concern for our well-being created a positive, supportive environment, which made us all feel valued and appreciated. Coach Howard leaves behind a legacy of leadership, inspiration, and kindness. He touched many athletes over his career with his generous and compassionate spirit. My personal visits with Coach in Arizona carried on for many years. A golf game with him was always a highlight of those visits. His competitive spirit was still evident. I missed those days. As John Wooden said, a good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life. Final whistle has ended your game. May you rest in peace, Coach. Bill Moody. Sandra, you want to fix this?
Looking back on the memory of the dance we shared beneath the stars above. For a moment, all the world was right. How could I have known that you'd ever say goodbye? And now I'm glad I didn't know the way it all would end, the way it all would go. Our lives are better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. Holding you, I held everything. For a moment, wasn't I the king? But if I'd only known how the king would fall, hey, who's to say? You know I might have changed it all. And now I'm glad I didn't know the way it all would end, the way it all would go. Our lives are better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. It's my life, it's better left to chance. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance.
Okay, that's been shut down.
Thank you, Sander. Great job. So thank you to all of our speakers. Your words paint a vivid picture of Gary's heart, his humor, his passion, and his impact. So now we have time for open mic. Anybody who would like to say a few words, if you can keep them to 5 minutes. No. 5 minutes and keep it positive. Thank you.
I'll do that first, because that ponytail was beautiful. Gary Howard loved his players, and the Calgary Herald did not always love his players. And professional athletes, you can rag on them because they're being paid to play. And this one reporter was just horrible. He rated the players, and most of these were first-year high school kids from Calgary because you couldn't recruit certain places. So Gary was so mad. Nobody on the team got better than a D- in the Calgary Herald. So he said, I'm doing something. He said, I could get an earring. I could get a tattoo on my forehead. I'm going, no. He said, I'm growing a ponytail. Well, you could see how sad that ponytail was. But he said, and of course the Herald, the reporter picked up on this. He said, why is Coach Howard growing a ponytail? Is he, losing his mind? Blah, blah, blah. So all the articles were about this ponytail. And he said, they're going to write about me now, and they're not going to degrade my team. So Dave Ginther and I, when Gary was home for home games, I tried to teach him to put in the elastic, the things that don't wreck your hair. Yeah, nice hair. And he would match it with his sweater. We had all sorts of those things. And then when they were on road trips, Gary could not get the thing in his hair. So his manager, Dave Ginther, had to put it into his hair before the games. I just wanted to know there was a really good reason for that kind of wimpy little ponytail.
Well, good afternoon. My name's John Lavin. I'm from Winnipeg, and I'll bring a little different perspective because I had the pleasure, although we didn't like him very much, of playing against Gary Howard coached teams for 4 years when he was at the University of Brandon. And Gary came up from South Dakota. He brought with him a guy, I think his name was Willie something. Anyways, Willie was the only guy in that team that could dribble and shoot. That's what Gary started with. And over the course, Willie Jerks was his name, that's it. Over the course of 4 years, Gary built that team up into a respectable team in Western Canada basketball. And to this day, Gary is not only well thought of, but he's still revered in Manitoba in the basketball community for not only what he did at Brandon, but just the man he was then and after. 1973, 72-73, University of Manitoba and UBC were fighting it out for first place in what was then the WCIA AA, right from Manitoba through to Victoria. And of course, at that time, there was only one team that came out of the West, and the top two teams played a best of three to get that spot. And we were battling with UBC. And we go into Brandon. We'd beat them about 3 weeks earlier by about 40 points. And Gary decided that, and that was a time there's no shot clock, there's no three-point line. Gary decides he's going to go into stall. So there we are, one of the top teams in the country. We ended up losing in the national final that year. The score at halftime is 11-10 for Brandon. If we lose this game, we got to go to UBC and try and win 2 out of 3. If we win the game, BC's got to come to Manitoba. The score at the end of the game was 14-13 Manitoba. We played 19 minutes and 30 seconds of the second half. Well, I shouldn't say. We scored to go up 12-11. Then we played about 19 minutes of the second half with Brandon passing the ball between the guard and the forward to get it over the 22nd line. They scored on a, because it's in Brandon. I won't go through the details. It'll take too long. We ended up scoring in the last second shot and won that game 14-13. And that was quite an event. But we all, we didn't like Gary very much either. He was full of passion. He would pound the floor. He would yell at the refs, even when they were down 30, urging his guys on. But we certainly respected him. In my final year, we actually lost our coach the year before. We changed coaches. We graduated 6 players. That's the year that Jerry Hemmings came over from Lakehead. I think you and Joe Parks came from Lakehead to play for Gary. He tried to get myself and a guy by the name of John Groban to come out and play for him as well. And his pitch was, you guys aren't going to be very good this year, and we're finally going to beat Manitoba. And we thought pretty hard, John and I, about coming out. I had to get 2 courses in a computer science degree, so I decided to stay. But sure enough, that season, we lost 2 games in Brandon. We beat them both in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, but we lost 2 in Brandon. Shouldn't come as a surprise that one of the refs was Bill Moody. So for those of you that have played in that little bandbox at Brandon University with the refs who were also Gary's best friends at the time, that was a tough slug. But after that, I got to see him from a different perspective because I took a job in Calgary, and in 1975, there's a little article in the Calgary Herald, I think, announcing that there's going to be tryouts for a Western Canada Summer Games team in Alberta, and Jack Kenyon, who was at Mount Royal, was going to be the coach. So I figured out, what the hell, I haven't played much in the last year and a half, but I'll go give it a shot. So I go out, and there's about 60 players, and sure enough, they're going to pare it down to 30, and at the end of the session, they read off all the names, and my name's not there. That's fine, no big deal. I go home. Monday morning, the phone rings. It's Gary. He says, "John, why didn't you stick around?" I said, "Well, Gary, they didn't call my name, so there's no point in sticking around." He said, "Look, next tryout's this Saturday." Told me where it was. He said, "Just get there." I said, "Okay." So I go there. They cut it down to, I think they were going down to about 18 or so. And sure enough, at the end of that day, my name's not on the list. Kenyon's a coach. He didn't know me from anything. Sure enough, Monday morning, the phone rings. It's Gary. He says, "John," he says, "Jack's taken ill. I'm going to be the coach." He said, "If you promise me you'll get in shape, you'll be on that team. Show up next weekend for the final cuts." So I ended up playing on a summer games team thanks to Gary. And it wasn't that I was a star player, but he saw me play 4 years in university, and I had some of the qualities like I was tough, I was a hustler, I tried to beat guys up. I was a bit of a plow horse playing with some thoroughbreds. But I think the real reason he wanted me on the team was because he was determined he was going to run a 1-4 offense. We had Tom, we had Tim Tallstrip, we had Dave Holland from Edmonton, and he wanted me mostly to beat up on Tom in practices. So that's my story with Gary Howard. But a tremendous respect for the man. After that summer, he actually asked me to help out with the team in the fall and to coach the JV team. And about a week into that, I realized how little I knew about basketball and how much Gary knew and how dedicated he was. So, those opportunities that he gave to me and to people like me, made a difference in our lives, and we'll always remember him. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. I'm going to have to set a bit of a scene for you. In 1976, after the season finished, we, as a team, went to Israel to play in some basketball tournaments in various places in the country. And when we arrived at the airport in Tel Aviv on the plane, immediately the plane was surrounded by military with guns. And while we were touring around the country, very often the school groups would be out with their teacher, and the teacher's carrying a automatic weapon. So it was a bit tense, and at times, our families back home are wondering what the hell's going on over there. They hear reports about what's going on in Israel, didn't know our schedule, and we're thinking that, oh, geez, it's concerned about us as players. So I can't remember where we were staying. I think there's 5 of us here today that were on that trip. And can't remember where we were staying, but there were hotel-like rooms. And so we got called up to Coach's room, some of us that were there, and arrived in the room, and Coach wasn't there. I think Arlene was there. Nick and Heather's mom was there. And we go, okay, well, where's Coach? And we're sitting around on the bench waiting for Coach. And all of a sudden, through the curtains that had been drawn on the balcony, comes this figure charging through the curtains with a towel wrapped around his head and a black band in it as an Arab sheik, as a terrorist to scare us. And that was one of his practical jokes. Now, which of you guys were there? Pat, were you there in the room at that time?
I got bad memories.
You got the bad memories. Yeah, I think it was the single guys that didn't travel with their spouses. Well, Ian was there, so. Yeah, and that was so he was a practical joker in sense of that. So that was quite the trip. Another thing that happened on that trip is we played on an outdoor concrete cinder block. It was not even concrete. It was pavement. blocks laid on an outdoor court, and we're playing a game against in a tournament in some kibbutz, and Don Else, who was on that team, was trying to impress somebody, so he was diving for loose balls on a concrete surface. And the highlight of that trip was the John Wooden was there watching it and probably wondering who these guys were diving on concrete surface. So, but anyways, that was for me, that was quite the trip, and got to know the guys on the team quite well that year. So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Pat Lee, and I was coached by Coach for a couple of years. When he first started, I was in his first time he started coaching. It was myself and Tom and a bunch of Lyle and Ted, et cetera. But anyway, I go on and play my 2 years. I get my degree. Things are looking good. I'm married at the time, and I'm off to Aldergrove, back to BC, and with my wife, who happened to live in that area. And I was sort of a transient, lived all over the all over. My family moved quite a bit. So back to BC, and I'm sitting in 2 years go by, and I'm sitting in my counseling office just off the gym, and secretary calls down and says, I have this call from Calgary. And okay, good. Maybe it's either Tom or Ted or somebody that I know from back there, maybe passing through or seeing what's going on. And then Coach is there and on the line. Whoa, it surprised me. And he asked me, he says, you have another year of eligibility. I've got a whole bunch of really young guys, and would you consider coming back and finishing out your last year? And I said, well, I don't know. I have to ask first, and we just had a child as well. So it was like, so I talked to Vicky, who's my wife, and we decided we would give it a go and give it a try. Now, Coach took good care of us, so we didn't have many financial concerns. But anyway, as I go through and I reflect on that year, we went into to Brandon, and it was Coach's first team that went back to Brandon. And I knew Coach very well. I often say the best year I've ever had as a pro D. I was a teacher by trade, and we have all these pro D days that are, in my opinion, just a waste of time. But anyway, the best pro D I ever had in my life was 2-3 hours a day in Coach's office talking the game of basketball. Talking about, I see some of the coaches here, I see Kenny's here, and we would talk a lot about Victoria, obviously, because that was a very good program, at the time. And anyway, that for me was unbelievable. I gained a sense of real pride in respect for the coach that would spend that kind of time with me. Anyway, we go into Brandon, and I am absolutely pumped and wanting to do everything I can to try and see that experience is a good one for Coach, because he was coming off of Brandon, and he had tremendous respect there. The gym was packed. It was loaded. Everybody was there talking to Coach. Everybody was around him, and it seemed like he knew everybody in town. So we go into the game, and Coach had a couple rules that were really important. One was a technical foul. If you picked a technical foul up, you sat down, and you were done for the half. And so I am absolutely pumped in this game. And in the first quarter of the game, maybe halfway through it, John will recognize this call. John Whelan will recognize this call. I had a very famous hook that I would use to get around guys. And I got around that, and I got a foul. Well, I took the ball, and I was so pumped in the game because I wanted to do so well for my coach, who was, anyway, I wanted to do so well for the coach. I took that ball. I threw it as hard as I can. I think it bounced off that referee's chest to center. I mean, I was so mad at the call. Anyway, he teased me up, and if you can envision this, and I knew what was going to happen. So if you can envision, the court's behind me here, Coach is over there like this. I give the ball, I walk all the way to the sideline. I walk all the way down to the far end. I walk along the baseline, and I take the last seat sitting on the bench. I was scared spitless that I was going to get murdered, all right? So coach never came down and said a word. He never said a word to me. But you could see the steam rising off his head. Anyway, we're walking, halftime comes. We're walking across the court. I said to Hasselfield, who was our assistant coach at the time, I'm not going in there. I'm not going in. All right. John says, you got to go in. I says, no. I said, if we go in there, someone's getting killed. And I said, and anyway, so we kind of walk our way in. I sit myself down, and coach starts off on me he says, well, guys have already mentioned it. He says words I don't even think people knew what they were. I mean, I've never heard that kind of vocabulary before. Anyway, he goes off on me, and young George Hardesty is sitting there, and he goes to my defense. Well, coach picked that guy up off of the chair, threw him up against the wall, and his little stubby he jammed that thing in there and used every single profanity that he could come up with to describe how he interrupted his halftime talk. All right? So that goes on for a while, and he just couldn't let go of it. The horn, there's 3 buzzers, right? I look at Hasselfield with my eyes wide open, going, let's get out of here. All right? And I jump up, coach, we got 3 minutes. And Hasselfield, coach, we got to go. So we go out there. Anyway, to make a long story short, I've never been so more proud of the group of young men that I played with it that year. We went out in that half and just had I think maybe one of the best halves of basketball that we've ever had. We were down 20, easy 20 at half. It was what? 24. Jeff was there. We were down 24. These guys Jeff was part of the young crew I was with. And we went out there and played a half that I think may have been our best half of the season and brought it back really close. I don't know if we got it to 2 or whatever, but it was so close. And after the game, the thing that now as an old coach now, I've coached my whole career. As a coach, when I reflect back on that game, the thing that made me most proud was that everybody came out of the stands and was talking to coach about what that young team was able to do against a top 10 team in the country. And when I look back on it, I just was so proudful and had so much pride at the fact that we were able to give coach that opportunity to be respected and stay respected by the people in Brandon. And so I've never forgotten that as a coach. So that's just one area that when I came back that I really enjoyed. And now as an older coach, when I reflect back on my time with Gary, there is no better mentor that I ever had. There's no better person that gave me the confidence to be the kind of person that I became. And I had a fairly successful career as a coach, and it was all the things that all these gentlemen have talked about that I admired about coach and that I took with me as a coach. And the teams that we played for are often a reflection of your coach. And our teams at UCFV or not UCFV, but at U of C were of that. And the teams that I coached at the school that I was at were exactly like that. And I look at Ken Shields sitting in the audience here, and I know what kind of a coach he was, and I know that his teams reflected his personality. And I think the thing that I loved about Coach Howard was that he helped us become better players, better men, better mentors, better coaches, and through that I just am so grateful. And I thank you, I thank all of you here for being here. It is just a pleasure to rekindle old friendships. So I thank you.
Pat's never understood the timing of 5 minutes. So to tell the other half of that story, I'd like to introduce Jerry Hemmings. Jerry took over from Gary at the University of Brandon in 1974, won national championships at a small school. And he was always eventful to watch coach. He was a great coach. Jerry.
Well, I've been in Canada since 1969, and I still don't speak one of Canada's two official languages. But anyhow, I appreciate Ann, you invite me to come out. It's been a great day today, one I know the coach would have been proud of. But, and I know what it is to play for him, because he had that little stub. And that year, that would have been 1971-72. And we had 10 rookie players. He'd recruited, I think, 8 kids out of high school in the U.S. at that time. There was no import rule. And he wore, and I've still got spots on my chest here. It still hurts. So, and I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. But anyhow, I got to share the story about Gary getting the job at Brandon. I think it was 1968. And George Berger, who was the AD at Lakehead, him and Gary, they were together at the University of South Dakota back in the early 60s. So George knew that Gary was looking to get into university coaching, so the Brandon job opened. So he contacted him and said, Gary, you may be interested in this job. So Gary gets a hold of Doug Stees, and they make arrangements that Gary would come up and get an interview. Well, after the interview process, Doug said to Gary, I want to show you around campus, and I'd like to show you our library. Well, Gary said, well, the first thing, I played 4 years at the University of South Dakota, and I never was in the library once. So they walk across campus. Jeff, you know how the campus works there. So you can go over, and they just had a snowfall. So it was a nice, clean, white snow. I think this was in May. If you know Brandon, it's Manitoba. We say it's 10 months wintertime and 2 months bad skating. So Gary gets over to the cafeteria, and they go out the doors. And Gary says, Doug, do you mind if I take my shoes off? I want to walk in that snow. Gary really wanted this job, and he wanted, although he was from South Dakota, but he wanted to let him know, hey, the weather is not going to bother me here. So Gary takes off his shoes, takes his socks off, rolls up his pant leg, and they go over to the library. And then he comes back, and he puts his shoes back on, and they go over to the athletic office, and Doug Stee said they had set up that Gary wanted a map of Manitoba in Doug's office. And it was like a travel agency, Denny. They had the map set up, and they had the blue pens, red pens, white pens. So Gary was going to set out where he was going to recruit at in Manitoba. Anybody know where Flim Flam, Manitoba is? I mean, that's up north, right? Bobby Clark country. So anyhow, so he says, I'm going to put a scout up here in Flim Flam. So he puts a pin up there, and I'll put one in Minnedosa. We'll get one in Portage. We'll put 2 scouts in Winnipeg and Verdun, Manitoba. So he had it all laid out, not realizing at that time, it's basically 2 sports played in Manitoba, and that's baseball in the summertime and hockey in the wintertime. And so anyhow, and then from there, Doug said, well, Janet's going to fix dinner, so would you go have dinner with us? And he said, yeah, I'll have dinner with you guys. So he goes over, and Doug says, Gary, would you have a beer with me? And he said, yeah, I'll drink one or two, maybe two. And Doug had picked up 24 case. So after they drank the 24 beers, Doug said, I got the coach that I want. Because his personality was just unbelievable. But go back on the 2 big games. Now, I wasn't on those teams, but John had mentioned one of them earlier. And that there's one game, and Ann, you may have heard this story, that Gary was into kind of motivation, and he thought his players' arousal level was too low. So he wanted to pick it up. So he went in and gave his big pep talk. Then he turns the lights off and then fires a blank gun. Boom! And all of a sudden, Bill Moody told me this, who's on the team. He's about half the players were peeing down their legs, and the other half he thinks shit in their pants. And I could have seen that. So that was one of them. And then was the Manitoba game, which is still probably, well, a lot of the older people died now, but they remember that Stall game. And that was 14-13. You were off on your years there. It was 1971. Yeah. And Brandon had the lead, and then all of a sudden, maybe that's why he didn't come today, Bill Moody turned the ball over. And they went down, and some of you may remember back then they had a really good guard named Angus Burr. And Angus Burr hit the winning shot to win the game. So anyhow, and that's probably one of the biggest games people talk about if they're older, is that Stall game. Well, I just wanted to share a few words. I played for the guy for a year. I enjoyed it. It was a great time. We didn't win a lot of games that year, and that's why that nub kept getting smaller and smaller. Thank you.
Well done, Jerry. Appreciate that. My name is Greg Hess. Most of you. I'm truly grateful for the opportunity that I had to meet Gary Howard and end up having this room of so many people that have changed my life, that have been part of it. Look around and the relationships are deep. And I haven't seen some of you for 20, 30 years. And it's there. And it's so exciting. You know, I remember sitting in a gym in Red Deer, Alberta, which I'm going to the inflection point of when all of this that's happening now happened for me. I'm sitting in that gym. I'd played for Lethbridge Community College. I'd been at Idaho State University and a few places, but I still had 3 years of eligibility left. And he sat down beside me. I didn't know who he was, really. I kind of knew a little bit. And I got talking to him, and I go, you know, this guy's got some spark. This guy fires me up. And sure enough, I ended up here on campus the next year. And I played 3 years for Gary. And I think, like I say, I'm so grateful for that he taught me about coaching. Because today, that is exactly what I still do. I found out years ago what it really is to find your why and what that matters. I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and everybody thought I was going to die. And I was told to get things in order. I was told to get an obituary together. Very, very powerful stuff for somebody. And I look back on that, and after I came out the other side, went through about 6 months of recovery, I started to look at these messages. And it was all about me being a coach and a mentor and supporting me. And I go back to, where did I learn that? Where did that come from? It came from Gary Howard in so many ways. So many ways. So today, and from that day forward, I look back at what was my real why. I remember when I was in maybe 8 years old, in Pocatello, Idaho, dribbling the ball down the middle of the floor, giving a fake, throwing a pass to somebody, scoring a layup, and having a feeling that has filled my heart and continued to drive me for the rest of my life. And that's giving an assist and seeing people grow. And that's what coaching's about. That's what Gary Howard was about. And that's why I'm so grateful to be able to stand here in front of you and think of all these friends and people that I've continued to stay in contact with because of that one moment in Red Deer Gym at the high school provincial championship where Lethbridge Community College has sent me up there to go look at something. They just gave me money to go vacation, realistically. But whatever, I went and I met Gary Howard, and I figured it out, and I came here instead of going to any other else, and I played my heart out for 3 years for him. And I'll never forget it, and I'm so grateful. Thank all of you.
Not everybody here played for Gary. I didn't, obviously. But Gary was a man who took chances. The very first time I decided that I was going to work for Gary, I'd been working with the Dino football team for 2 years, and I was told that Gary needed a trainer manager. So I wandered into his office and I said, I hear you need help with being your trainer manager. He says, who are you? And what do you want? And we talked. He says, okay, I'll give you a try. Well, the very first road trip we went on, I got food poisoning. And I was brutally sick. In Brandon, by the way. And on the way from Brandon to Winnipeg, I'm throwing up out the window. And we get to Winnipeg, and we're getting ready for the game. I'm taping ankles and throwing up in the bucket. They take me to the hospital after the game. We play the next day. We get on the plane, and the women's team happened to be on the same thing. I get barf bags from everybody in the thing. And I'm thinking we get home, and Gary's going to say, you're done. You're out of here. Well, he says to me, he says, anybody that'll tape an ankle while throwing up is good enough for me. So I worked for Gary for the next 2 or 3 years as trainer manager, and Nick and Jody, I spent a lot of time with you guys when you were little, you too, Heather, around the gym. And one day he said to me, he says, I need a smoke break. Can you run a drill? Have you been watching? And I go, okay, yeah, I can do something or other out here. So he started giving me jobs to do as an assistant coach. I didn't know at the time he was training me to do that or not, but that's what he was doing. Then I graduated and went away for a year. I came back and I wanted to be involved again. I wanted to put some more time back into it. And he said, well, I got a good trainer. I got a good manager. Don't want you to get in their way. I didn't want to get in their way either. They were friends of mine. And he said, you know what? Why don't you help me coach? He took a chance on a guy who never played, who only had a couple of physical activity courses. He did let me do coaching theory, which was always interesting. And I started to work at practices, but I also started to work on behind the scenes. And then after about the first year, he started saying, you know what, we need to start getting more connected in the city of Calgary with the Calgary kids. And I got more splinters on my arse from watching high school basketball games that following year. There were nights I'd watch 3 or 4 games, or parts of 3 or 4 games, while I was recruiting a bunch of you guys. And Gary took a risk on somebody who knew nothing about basketball, but knew about people. And I think about some of the players that played over the years. He took a risk on some of you because he didn't know you from anybody. But the one thing he always said to me when I went out recruiting was look for the guys who work their ass off. Work for the guys who care. And we can find players there. So there was 3 decades. I worked parts of all 3 of those with Gary. And then after Gary retired, we kept in touch. We would come out and visit Ann and Gary in the Okanagan, and Gary even had patience with me in my golf game, which was quite hard to do. But I have a lot of fond memories of Gary, and I have a lot of fond memories of you, and I look at a couple of other people here that I know didn't play for Gary, but worked with him as coaches and got a lot out of it. And I think of this, that every time that he invested in you, you got to be a better person.
Okay, enough of the old farts. We'll get a little youth movement going here. I'm not going to say too much. Everything that needs to be said about Coach has been said. So it's about the stories, and I mean, I think probably safe to say Gary struck fear in us, for sure, and he wasn't the most predictable guy at times, but he managed to find levity in moments when you expected to sort of get a strip torn off you. And there's actually a guy here today that I still remember the story, Brad. Where's Brad Gallup? So we were in a film session, and Brad fell asleep. And Coach picked up on it. And he's looking at all us, and obviously we think he's going to get a strip torn off of him. Brad, are you sleeping? Yes. No, I'm not sleeping, Coach. And we just expected him to, basically be benched or whatever, and then Gary started laughing at the end of it, right? So it's just that unpredictability there. One of the other stories that sort of stuck out around levity in situations was he loved the guerrilla drill because we weren't a good rebounding team that year, Jeff, that you were coaching us, and that was my third year. And so he pulled us together after we were failing at the drill, and he said, "We need 5 guys to the defensive boards. 5 guys. Not 1, not 2, not 2.5. 5 guys to defensive boards." So we were scared, but then he started laughing and made us laugh at a moment when we thought that, we probably were going to get in trouble or whatever, run lines. So just one more, he taught life lessons. He always talked about don't be afraid to take risks, make a decision and live with it. That was another one. And I decided, we were running a drill where we had to pass the ball from half, and that was an option to throw an alley-oop pass. And I wasn't quite certain whether it was there, and he saw me hesitate as I made a pass that got intercepted. And said, "Kiss, you got to make a decision and live with it." And I said, "Coach, I made a decision. I'm living with it. It doesn't seem like you are." So I took a risk. I didn't know how this was going to go, and he kind of stumbled and gave me a little grin. And I hope he's, living with my decision. So anyways, just small stories. Thank you.
So there's a few legends here. Jerry was one. Wayne hasn't stepped up to speak yet, but the other person here that we want to introduce is, do we have to introduce you, or does everybody know you? Ken Shields.
I asked to be a speaker. Boomer said, if you ask them to pass the hat, because everybody does what they love doing. No one's passing the damn hat here to raise money for you. Players, there were wonderful things you said. Some of you exposed yourselves. Bish, you exposed yourself. I'm not saying your fly was down, but it probably was too. He comes up, he tells everybody how tough he is and what job he did, and then he whines about being guarded by Gary Howard. And then he talks about me. Maybe you were right. Maybe you were a pussy. Sandor, you did a hell of a job. He started, Tech. The first 15 slides were about you. Yeah. But you said some good words. So I'm sitting with Wheeland. But before that, I see Rommel. One of Gary's sayings, and I love his sayings, was the horses are in the barn, now we got to teach them how to pull the plow. He was talking about you, Rommel. So Wheeland is doing one of my games. And Gary and I had fun. It didn't matter when you played Gary's teams, you knew you were in for a battle. And you guys sitting out here, so many guys that we competed against, and the stories that you've told, they confirmed in me how much I love Gary. Because you guys were tough. When you played the Dinos, you knew you were in for a battle. So you better be ready. Because Gary did a hell of a job. And the one thing about Gary was that it didn't matter what happened in the game. Everybody fought like hell. After the game was over. And we were buddies. Never once did we get pissed off about what happened in the game. And we became good friends, even though we fought each other like hell. One day we're playing in the old red gym, big crowd. Wheeland happens to be revving. Gary and I stand at midcourt. Game is going on. We're chatting away, watching the game, smiling, having a good time. Wheeland, we're looking over at Wheeland, I'm looking over at Wheeland, laughing. Whistle blows. Wheeland comes over. I say, who invited you? You're not invited here. So he goes, this isn't happening in my game. Get to your benches. I look at Gary and he looks at me and we have to go to the benches before we start pissing ourselves. It's another time, there's 100 stories. Another big game in the red gym. We're leaving at halftime. We're walking together. The referees are in front of us. And Howard is just carving these guys up. And then he's looking at me and he goes like this. And then he goes right back at him. And then looks at me and goes, like this. And I'm peeing myself. We're walking out together. So our games were fun. And all the things you guys have said, and Boomer, thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to speak. I had to pay my way out here to speak at the banquet. So, anyway, Howard. I can't say enough about Gary. And everybody that came up and spoke, you confirmed in me everything that I loved and respected about Gary, because I feel the same way. And I don't have another coach that I battled with and he battled where we had never one whining or carving up or negative talk after the game, I got screwed or whatever. Not once. And we had many battles. Hemmings gets up here and speaks. If you guys want a translation, it ain't coming from me. His drawl got worse every year he's been here. But guess what? He was Gary's wingman. And the love you guys had for Gary came over in spades today. And you only confirmed in me my own feelings for Gary. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Mattis, and I never played basketball for Gary Howard. I wish I had, but I had the privilege of being his neighbor for the last 17 years. And I knew Gary as a man, not at all as a coach. Gary very, very rarely ever talked about basketball. He did tell me about the low-scoring game in Manitoba. But him and I, we did a road trip 3 years ago, I think it was, to South Dakota to see his son, Nick. And we spent a lot of time in the car, and he told me a lot of basketball stories. But every one of them was about his players and his admiration for you people. I know what I've heard today, your admiration for him, and I can say that his admiration for you was the same. So the one thing that isn't on the board over there that Gary told me many times, and he lived it, was that be who you is. Because if you ain't who you is who you ain't. And Gary was who he was. So I was just a great friend, and I miss him every day. The other thing I wanted to say was, you talk about how he talked as a coach. The only time I ever heard that man swear was when he had a tough time opening a bottle of rum. So, anyways, he was a great man, and like I say, I miss him every day. So, thank you.
What an amazing event. Thank you, Anne, for what a great idea of having this event. Thank you. Okay. And thank you to all the speakers who joined us and shared their stories. Like I said, not always did we like him, but we admired him, we respected him, and he was a great coach. There's some appies and some cookies and some water. Phil? Sure. Sure. Okay. And I hope everyone signed the guest book. Anne would like to follow up with those people who are here today. Okay. So thank you for coming very much. All the players come up here, please.